When it comes to camera movement, you usually think about putting your camera on a gimbal, but that's not always convenient because if you travel, you want to keep your bag as lightweight as possible. So in this video, I have a few shot ideas for you that you can do during your travels without a gimbal, and I would say let's get started. And before we get started, it's important to mention that, of course, if you don't have any stabilization in your camera, it will not work. Ideally, you have so-called IBIS or inbuilt sensor stabilization in your camera, which most cameras above $1,000 have today. But if you have one of those cheaper cameras, you want to have at least optical image stabilization in your lens. It's usually the case if your lens has OIS or IS somewhere on the lens, then that's stabilized. And you ideally also want to use electronic or digital image stabilization in your camera if it doesn't have sensor stabilization. And that's usually referred to as DIS or EIS, depending on which camera you choose. But now let's come to the shot ideas. And our first shot will be the so-called background focus parallax. So that means that I have an object in my background in focus while my main subject, is out of focus, and then I parallax a bit or slide a bit around the subject to kind of reveal what's in the background. Motorbike. And that shot is great to put after a sequence of shots with your main subject, like her, for example, in focus. Little child coming now. Because after such a sequence, you usually want to visit a certain location or so. And then it's good, instead of only showing the location, to at least have one shot with your main character and the location so that people see the connection between it. So what I will do now is I film at f2.8 aperture to have her out of focus. Then I focus first on the background, on the lighthouse in that case. Then I lock my focus with the AF/MF on switch on my lens. You might also have another function for that in your camera. On Canon cameras, that's, for example, the servo AF pause that you can assign to a button. If you don't have this button on your lens, then that might help you. And then I will just stand behind her and basically rotate the camera a little bit around her while having the background in focus. So let's do that. So focus on the lighthouse. Then I lock the focus there. And now I only have to slide and rotate the camera a little bit so that I reveal the lighthouse. Let's do it a little bit slower again. That looks pretty cool. So that's a really nice shot that you can put after a sequence with your main character, but before you actually show shots of the destination that you're going to. And our next shot type is low angle shots, and that is not so much about camera movement. You can slide it around, you can move forward and backward, etc. What it means is basically that you place your camera lower as your subject. So in that case here, I would place it somewhere on this height, maybe even lower later. Actually, I will do it lower here because we have this nice rope. And low angle shots are great because they always make your subject look a bit bigger, and bigger means basically epic. So even if you have small people like me and her, I'm just about 170 centimeters, then this can also work to just make your subjects look a bit bigger. And what you can also do is to simply put certain objects in the foreground to emphasize this effect, to make it look even bigger. So the shot that I want to do now is here behind this rope, just to emphasize a little bit more how she walks down here the pier. So for this shot, I will go a little bit back. I'm filming at 35 millimeters so that I get the rope here in the front, but also her in the back. It's important that she goes a bit forward so that I can focus on her. So now I set the focus. And now walk, please. Okay, that's the shot. It's quite easy. But as mentioned before, you don't necessarily have to choose a super low angle like that, and you don't necessarily have to put something in the foreground. We can also get a low angle shot just like that while kind of standing and putting the camera a bit lower. So I could do that, for example, now at 15 millimeters, nice and wide. Gail, can you come a bit back, please? Yeah. So now I could just film a little bit from here, and it also makes her appear bigger. So let's get one like that. And 3, 2, 1, go. And so there we also have a low angle shot. And next up is the follow or tracking shot. So it's actually very simple. Basically what I'm doing here is that I just walk behind her. You could also do the opposite. You could walk backwards, but it's even more complicated. And to do that without using a gimbal, it's important that you use the so-called duck walk. So instead of walking like normally where you have a lot of bumps in your footage, you like bend your knees a little bit and then you make small and steady steps. So it looks quite funny. It looks kind of like that while I'm walking, and that ensures that it's a lot smoother looking later, so you don't necessarily need a gimbal to get such shots. But it's like the more you walk, the longer the shot will be, the more likely it is that you will get jitters, and you will most likely also have to stabilize it in post. It's good if you use Sony cameras though, because there you can use Catalyst Bros and then stabilize it a bit later, so that you should film a little bit wider because it crops in then. But that's actually a good option to make it look really smooth, actually as smooth as a gimbal when you use Sony cameras. I'm on Canon right now, so I completely rely on the inbuilt stabilization now, on the lens stabilization and my legs. And one more tip for such shots is that if you have leading lines like we have here on the pier, then it's actually quite nice because all the lines lead away from the camera and then you have the subject walking right in the middle, and it's just perfect here. We have the lighthouse at the end of the pier, and here all the lines point towards the lighthouse and she's in the middle. So it's actually a really nice framing. So I would say let's get the shot. To do that, I would say you turn around, please. Stand like really in the middle. Okay, come a bit back. Okay, and I just walk behind her with a duck walk. So let's do that. Film at 15 millimeters now and go. Okay, I hope you could see a little bit more. And another tip for getting those shots is that you should film as wide as possible. I'm at 15 millimeter on full frame cameras right now. Film with APS-C, for example, that would be around 10 millimeters depending on your camera, because the wider the lens is, the less shake you can see in the lens. And our next shot will be the focus reveal shot, where basically at the end of the shot, your subject, whatever you want to film, is in focus, but before it's not in focus. And to do that, I use a little trick, which is that I will reverse the shot later. So I essentially start by having my subject, which will be her hand in that case, in focus, and then I move the camera back. Also, she will move her hand back then. And when I reverse that in post, it looks like I would move forward, her hand would move in the shot, and then it's in focus. So I basically do that here to kind of give the impression that she would stand now and enjoy the view over the ocean. So let's get this shot. Now what I will do first, I got a 24 millimeters. It works a little bit better because I will otherwise be too close to her hand. And here I would also recommend to shoot at the lowest aperture that you have. In my case, it's f2.8, because then you get more blur. And because it's a focus reveal shot, you want to have as much blur as possible in the beginning. So use a low aperture here. Now I focus on her hand at first in the position where I want to be at the end. And now the trick is that you want to lock your focus. So essentially, when I have her hand in focus, then I will use the AF/MF switch on my lens here and switch it to MF, so the focus stays exactly where it is. So let's focus on her hand now. Then I will switch to manual focus. Now I start recording, and now. And what's also good with such shots is if you have 60 frames per second available in your camera, or maybe even 120, then you can shoot in that, because then you can do a speed ramp. Like you have it out of focus first, you see a bit of camera movement, then it ramps forward, and then in this example the hand would be in focus. Of course, you can do that with every object that you want to have. Hey, future Pascal here. We're doing a little break from the handheld shots, because even if you shoot handheld, a lot of the time, especially when you film yourself, you will use a tripod. And I usually use the Peak Design carbon fiber tripod when I travel, because it's super lightweight and it's super nice to use, but it costs around $600, which is a lot, especially if you're more on a budget. And so Small Rig recently sent me this tripod here. It's the, how is it called? It is the Small Rig carbon fiber tripod AP20, which is only around $150, so a lot cheaper. So that's what I brought with me on Koh Chang, where I shot the video that you're actually watching right now, and I already tested it for about a month here just to see if it performs good, because I already have my Peak Design tripod, and after testing it I must definitely say that my Peak Design tripod is a bit nicer, mainly because the small rig here is a lot thicker than the Peak Design when it's folded together. But aside from that, I must say it's super lightweight. It did the job. It has this nice clapping mechanism here. It doesn't break as far as other cheaper tripods. They always have this screwing mechanism, and usually it takes 1 or 1.5 years until it breaks for me. So from my experience, these mechanisms that the small rig has here work a lot better. Actually, the Peak Design uses a similar system. So if you're looking for a lightweight travel tripod and you don't want to spend $600 for it, then look into the small rig here. This video is not sponsored. I don't receive any money from small rig, but they sent me this tripod for free to test it. But to be honest, I don't really need this tripod. I have my Peak Design already. So that little shout out here is for you, to save you a little bit of money. But let's come back now to the main video. And our next shot is the half circle. That's at least how I call it. And that's actually a good follow-up shot to the last one, because now she's basically standing there. So I also want to show what she sees. Otherwise the shot before doesn't make any sense. So the way how this half circle shot works is basically that she stands there. Please turn around. Have your hand there as well, like stand like you did before. And now I will basically do kind of a half circle around it. It's not actually a half circle, not 180 degrees, probably more like 90 or 100 degrees or something, but you get the point. So what I do here is I spread my legs a little bit. You can't see that right now, but I just do that so I can balance my weight a little bit better from one side to the other. And then I just turn around. Probably film at 20 millimeters now, yeah. And then I essentially move my camera from the left side to the right, but I also rotate the camera against the camera movement in the same time to keep her in the center of the frame. So let's do that. As you see now, I go to the left side and then I just move to the right side, but I keep her all the time in the center. Let me also show you that from another perspective. So that's how it looks from another perspective. As you can see, it's actually a super easy and quick shot. You just have to spread your legs a little bit to be able to shift from one leg to the other, because then you get a bit bigger range of motion, and the bigger the range of motion is, the better the shot comes out. And next is also more a tip than an actual shot, and that is that you can easily add rotation to a lot of your shots. It's especially good if you close the subject, then while you're moving your camera forwards towards the subject, for example, you can like rotate the camera a little bit, because that's at first, especially if you use it together with slow motion, that makes the shots look a little bit more interesting. But in the edit, you can also use it together with speed ramping, so that you can have a quick sequence of camera motion always going in the same direction, and therefore you can add an interesting effect in post. I will show you in a second how that looks later. But it's important to mention also that you should not do that all the time. If you do that too often, that will not look good anymore. Then your video will look cheap. So let's start it right here. We had the background focus parallax shot before. So now I will show off the lighthouse here. And from there, I want to transition into this rotating shot sequence. So I will move my camera up, and then after moving up at the end, I will like rotate it out so that I can transition into the next shot. And for this sequence, I will use 4K 60 frames per second all the time, because 4K 60 frames per second allow me later in post to do speed ramping, and that actually comes really cool. So let's stand direct in front of the lighthouse, set the focus on the lighthouse, and then I'll move it up and rotate out. So this was just the first shot. This is not a full rotation. This is only there to go into this transition sequence. So now I'm looking for maybe 3 or 4 shots more that I can get like that. Let's see what looks interesting here. I would say I could get 1 rotation shot of the boat here. So in this case, I will start already in this position with my camera. Then I will rotate it fully by around 180 degrees, probably a little bit more. Focus on the boat. Okay, now that's a good one here of the boat. easy one. That was quick. And one more shot of this motorbike here. I really like the framing of it, but now I will not move out with a rotation. I will just move out with a slide to the left, because from there I want to transition into a time-lapse later to end this sequence. And the next one is also more like a tip instead of an actual shot, and that is that when you add camera movement, you should always either put something in the foreground or be very loud to something with your camera, because if you only film while standing and there's nothing like close to it, then the camera motion is not really visible. So let me show you what I mean here. I'm at 35 millimeters now. Let's film this boat there. Now if I would only hold my camera like that and film and slide to the right, and you can barely see any camera movement, right? But if I hold the camera something like that here, then the camera movement instantly becomes a lot more visible. It's not the best shot here right now. I just did it because the boat was driving around there. But you get what I mean, like the moment you put something right in front of your lens, or you maybe go very close to the ground so you actually film the ground, then camera movement is so much more visible. So that's very important. Don't just stand around and move your camera like that. Try to be close to objects, and you will see the camera movement a lot more. So that were all the shots for the sequence here at the pier. It's definitely not the best. We were a little bit under time pressure, so I think if we would have had a bit more time, I would have gotten better shots. But there's one more shot that you should get a lot for your travel videos and that you can do all the time. It mustn't be at the same place where you shot your actual sequences or whatever. So let's come to that now. And my last tip for this video is that you should shoot more time lapses, as I'm doing right now. Obviously, time lapses look cool, people love to look at them, but aside from that, it's also a great storytelling tool actually, because time lapses are kind of hole fillers that you can always put in your travel videos to transition from one scene to the next, but you can also use them as kind of opening shots, etc., to show a place where you are in a more interesting way. So time lapses are just clips that you can always shoot when you have a bit of free time, like I am having right now here during sunset at the beach, where we can't do anything anyway because, well, it's low tide, so it's not really there for going into the water. So perfect timing to shoot a time lapse. I would say it's time now to have a look at the final sequence with all the shots that we got in this video, including the time lapses. And by the way, if you don't only want to have a few tips on how to make better travel videos, but you want to generally learn how to make them better, check out the video that I will show you at the end of this video during the sequence. There you will learn more. And also, if you enjoyed this video, please leave me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. But now let's come to the sequence.